it is not popular to provide help to auto workers or to auto companies, but my job is to measure the costs of allowing these auto companies just to collapse versus us figuring out, can they come up with a viable plan. If they're not willing to make the changes and the restructurings that are necessary, then I'm not willing to have taxpayer money chase after bad money. And so a lot of it's going to depend on their willingness to make some pretty drastic changes. And some of those are still going to be painful because I think you're not going to see a situation where the U.S. auto makers are gaining the kind of share that they had back in the 1950s. I mean, we just didn't have any competition when, back then, Japan was in rubble, Europe was in rubble. We were the only players, around. And that's not going to be true. This is going to be a competitive global market. We have to make those adjustments. All right? Okay, it's a gentleman's turn. All right, this gentleman right here. We got a microphone behind you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Carlos Del Toro. I served in the Navy for 26 years, retired 4 years ago, and started a small business. So I first want to thank you for all the efforts that you and your administration has done on behalf of veterans and also on behalf of small businesses here recently.
Well, we appreciate your service.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My question is, one of the things that I have experienced over the last 4 years as a small business, trying to do business in the federal procurement business, essentially, as a small engineering company, is the challenge of the bundling of contracts, which has made it increasingly difficult for service-disabled businesses, all small businesses across the nation, to compete, basically, within the federal procurement system. I know that you believe in fair and open competition on a broad basis. I would suggest to you, and my question to you is, will your administration look at this issue and try to unbundle these contracts that make it more competitive for small businesses to work in the federal marketplace?
It's a great question. It's an issue that I'm familiar with. Just by way of background for people who aren't as familiar with federal purchasing, the federal government is such a big customer that sometimes for administrative convenience, what they do is they just say, here, Halliburton, here's a contract for $20 billion to do all these various things, and then you sort of figure out how you're going to divvy it up. Well, it may be that, I'm sorry, what was your name? Carlos. It may be that Carlos has a better product to sell for, for a segment of that contract, but he can't bid on the entire thing, right? And so what ends up happening is the taxpayer loses the benefit of a better product at a better price because everything's bundled into this huge contract with a giant general contractor who then divvies up the business. So one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, are there ways that we can unbundle and unpackage some of these goods and services that the government purchases? It'll save taxpayers money. It'll promote more competition. Carlos is still going to have to bid. He's still going to have to prove that his price is better and his product is better, but at least he's got a chance. Now, we're not going to be able to do that on everything because there's some things that, frankly, you need some economies of scale, right? But what we want to do is make sure that we're looking for every opportunity to unbundle, to give everybody a chance to compete so that we don't just have one or two or three major contractors who are getting every contract, because at a certain point what ends up happening is those contractors get so much clout in Washington, they're getting such huge contracts, then they start spending $1 million on lobbyists to make sure that the contracts keep going the same way. And you start seeing the system distorted in ways that aren't healthy. And the more players there are, the more Carloses there are who are out there scratching and striving to get some business. Ultimately, the better deal we'll get as taxpayers. So, great. Okay, here you go.
My name is Linda Bach, and I'm a registered nurse just in Prince George's County, Maryland. Been there 34 years at a free senior health center. And I'm here with my fellow nurses from SEIU. First of all, thank you for listening to us, because as nurses, we do listen to our patients all the time. We're their advocate. Absolutely. And so we appreciate this opportunity for you to hear from us. One of the things we want to make sure is that nurses are represented in the healthcare reform committees, because we want to be there on behalf of our fellow nurses and on behalf of the patients that we sometimes have to speak up for. So I really hope that we can be there so we can push the things like prevention and education that are so very important, so that we don't use our emergency rooms for their doctor visits. Right. And that we have more community-based health centers for those that are in need. And I really appreciate this opportunity to be heard.
Well, I appreciate that. I guarantee you nurses were part of the Healthcare Summit, and they will be at the table in all these discussions. I'm biased towards nurses. I just like nurses. When Michelle and I went in, and Malia was being born, the OB-GYN was a close friend of ours, and so was much more attentive than the usual OB-GYN might be. But the fact is, we only saw her for like 15 minutes. The rest of the time, it was nurses who were doing everything. When Sasha, our little precious pea, when she got meningitis when she was 3 months old, very dangerous. The doctors did a terrific job, but frankly, it was the nurses that were there with us when she had to get a spinal tap and all sorts of things that were just bringing me to tears. We've got a problem in this country, which is we have a shortage of nurses. Makes no sense given this unemployment rate. But the reason is because the pay of nurses, the hours of nurses, the quality of life of nurses, the fact that nurse professors are even worse paid than the nurses themselves, so you get these huge bottlenecks in terms of training as many nurses as we want. I mean, all these issues are part of the inefficiency of the healthcare system that has to be fixed. And the more we're emphasizing primary care, preventive care, wellness, all of which will save us money in the long term, the more that we can deploy nurses as the troops on the front lines in ultimately driving down some of these healthcare costs. So I think it's very important that nurses are a part of this process. So, here, we got Mike here. I'm hanging on to my mic.
Yes, sir.
I might not get it back.
Sir, you're the president. You always get it back. Sir, I'm Tom Sonner. I'm a service-disabled veteran, small business owner in Arlington, Virginia. My company, Educational Options, works with public schools. We serve more than 200,000 at-risk kids within public schools, providing online content, partnering with teachers, and I was honored to serve on your Education Platform Committee.
Wonderful.
Today, my question is, as a small business owner, my company is still profitable. We're still growing. We're still hiring. The money that I make as a profit, I'm plowing right back in. And even the money that I pay to the bank for my business loans, yet under current tax laws, all of that counts as income to me before I ever see a penny of it. Sir, could you please help small businesses by allowing